Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. If I can ask you all to turn off your cell phones or to put them on vibrate, please. Tonight's gathering is a stepping stone in what hopefully will turn out to be a process of one, recognition that we have many people, young people, and this problem is not limited to young people. I think there are adults in this community that likewise have a problem and have not dealt with their problem over years and live essentially lonely, alienated, disconnected lives. But the young people in the community are more vocal, are able to stand up here and tell us their stories. And within these stories, each one of us, I'm sure, is going to find a thread, something that touches us, something that brings us to an understanding of the difficulty that many of us, and I'm going to put myself in this group, of us, go through and live with and work with. And by beginning to recognize that there is a problem, by trying to put together a community of caregivers for the problem, and I want to thank all of the various people who are set up as a resource fair for after the meeting, where anyone who knows a friend, a child, a neighbor, a cousin. We all know people who are living difficult lives. So the resource fair is here for us to use, to connect with, to offer help to those who need help. And as I said, I believe this is a stepping stone. We're on the way to being honest with ourselves, to helping each other, and to finding a place where there is hopefully no individual who is suffering alone and doesn't know where and how to get the help that they need. That is the goal of Neshamus. It's been the goal of Aliyah and the Aliyah Girls Loft to reach out to young people in trouble, to provide a safety net to young people in trouble. And as I said, unfortunately, it's not only young people. So, opening up and asking people who have been through their own trials and tribulations to come and share their trials with us. I want to thank them all of the speakers tonight. It's not so easy to stand up here and bare your soul. But when others bare their souls for us, we learn about what our children may be going through, what our significant others may be going through, and hopefully we develop a strategy with which to help them. I'm going to ask our first speaker, Mr. Moshe Chanan. Moshe was born and bred in Crown Heights. He continues to live here now with his wife and 3 lovely children. God bless you all. Moshe attended the United Lubavitch Yeshiva. He's now serving as a life coach and a mentor to many. Moshe is also one of the founders of the thriving Ichkeles Shtibel. And obviously involved in communal affairs. Moshe.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rosen. I guess there's no turning back now. Dear Eibishter, I'm plagued with fear right now. I think that my speech might not be good. I think it might not come out right. And if it does, it might be not be heard, or may not be understood. I don't know what people will think of me. They're going to see me on Shabbos, they're going to see me at Simchas, and they might look at me differently. But I know that you brought me here. And if I'm here, I must be worthy and qualified. And it must be for a good purpose. Thank you to the incredible individuals that make this happen. I know that some of us were up at about 4 or 5 a.m. over the past few days. And I'd like to dedicate the merit of any hope or any positive change that may happen as a result of me speaking tonight to my beloved brother-in-law, Yeshua Polonsky, and his family. I just want to preface that I'm going to be talking about a few different things, but I'm not going to be talking a lot about all the good things and all the beautiful things, because I think what I am prepared to talk about is going to be most helpful. But in my life, I did have a lot of beautiful things growing up. Every summer, going to the bungalow colony, spending time with families, friends. These are the fond memories I have. Friday night meals with my family, singing songs. And I'm proud to be a member of my family, and I'm proud of my past. My first memory that I can remember that is significant is when I was approximately 7 to 9 years old. I didn't know how significant it was at the time, but now I do. And it was sort of like a fantasy. And the fantasy was that I would leave my parents' house, I would go to the alleyway, I would find the corner that was in a shadow, and I would sit on the stoop, and nobody would be around, and I would sit and I would cry. And I would cry my heart out. I would cry about all the feelings that I felt, which were difficult at the time. And somebody would be passing by, and he'd hear somebody crying, and he'd come by and he'd ask me what's wrong. I'd have the courage to tell him what I was feeling. I'd know what to say. And then that person would also tell me that everything's going to be okay, and he'd validate me. The feelings I had at the time, which I didn't really know what they were, but now I know. I felt most overwhelmingly not good enough, not part of, and needing to do things to compensate for my deficiencies. The things that I did, which were unhealthy, there may have been some healthy things that I did, but unhealthy things included stealing from pushkas, from pockets, stealing from stores on Kingston Avenue. I would do this because it gave me what I needed in order to feel okay. Whether it was the feeling that I got from doing what I was doing, or it was what I did with the money or the things that I stole. I had some consequences, some heavy ones. I think the heaviest one was there was somebody that would call me Ganav in school. That really hurt. I believed completely that I was unworthy, I was clumsy, and I was dirty. And I remember when I was in about 5th grade that I used to wear my coat all day, most of the year. I know now that's because I was insecure and I didn't have the courage to take it off. Wearing my coat helped me feel secure. Cool. When I was about 12, this is what I remember. Okay, when I was about 12, I remember admiring certain people's capacity to drink. I didn't admire people that would drink and get drunk. I admired the people that could drink and drink and drink and still keep a straight face and be standing at the end of the night. I remember my first cigarette going on talucha, and somebody went into shul and he left his cigarette outside, and I picked it up, and I had a friend teach me how to inhale, and I would smoke from then. I remember my first drinks, they were at bar mitzvahs. I was a younger kid in class. I was still 12, but the other kids would have a bar mitzvah, and they would fill up to cover the bottom of the shot glass from every kid. And most of the kids didn't like it, but I would take all of them and collect them all, and I would have myself one good shot. And that would give me just enough liquid courage to get on the floor and dance. From then on, I remember showing off at the capacity. Just like I admired the others, I had the capacity to drink. There were those that would look at it and be like, okay, look how much he can drink, and he's still keeping a straight face, and I felt really good about that. I had a relative that was kind of cut off with the family, but I was able to build a relationship with him, and he allowed me to come over to his apartment whenever I'd like, and over there I could do what I want and drink as much as I want, and nobody would bother me. There was a little bit of other substances going on there, but that was not for me. I would not partake with that. But over there, one thing's for sure, I felt accepted, I felt validated, and I felt I had the ability to do whatever it is I needed to do. At Shabbos, when I was 14, 15, when I was between 13 and 15, we had this thing that we would do. Every Shabbos, people would come over to my house. Before Shabbos, we'd pick up some beers. We would come into my bedroom, we would drink some beers, and then we would go out and walk around Crown Heights, go to the Botanic Gardens, or go to Prospect Park. And I remember feeling like things just came easy for other people, for the other people in the group of friends. They were able to do things that I felt were so difficult for me. For some reason, they were able to be so fluid about the things that we were doing, and for me, it was difficult. I didn't feel a part of. But one Shabbos, something different happened. And this time, I didn't drink with everybody. I knew my parents had bought a case of wine by mistake, and it was a sweet Rashi wine that was about 14, 15%, and nobody wanted anything of it. It was in our basement, and nobody touched it. I knew if I took out 2 bottles, nobody would know the difference, and that's what I did. I went into my bedroom by myself this time. I took a cup and I drank 2 bottles, one cup after the next. I didn't tell anybody. I wanted to see what it would like to just be normal outside, but in my head, I'd be after 2 bottles of wine. And for me, that was an exceptional experience. It was actually an amazing experience for me. When I walked out of my parents' house, also without telling anybody what had happened, I walked out of my parents' house, and I remember I felt like it was the first time I was seeing in color. I felt it was the first time I could hear the birds chirping, I could hear the trees, I could hear the leaves blowing. And a very important thing for me was I was able to look people in the eye, and I was able to say Good Shabbos. This is what I remember. When I was about 15 years old, I quit smoking cigarettes for about a year, and I ended up starting again. I learned a lot of Chassidus over the years. of 15, 16, 17, 18, and Hasidus really helped me a lot. But it helped me inside, but it didn't help me to stop drinking. When I was about 18, I was introduced to the bars and the Polish butterflies. And when I was that age, at 18, 19, I had no consequences for my drinking. Nobody telling me what I could and can't do. And I drink a lot. When I drank, it gave me a lot of self-esteem, and I felt like I was a part of a bigger group of people. The first time I ever smoked marijuana was when I was 19, and this is after many years of absolutely refusing to do it. It just came a certain point, I said, that's it, I'm going to just try it. Also an incredible experience. I'm not glorifying it. I'm just saying what it did for me. And what it did for me, it allowed me to laugh freely, and I believed that this was something I would never let go of. And this was the first time I really broke one of my own boundaries. My addiction, for the first time, made me do something that I did not want to do. And I swore it off. I was not going to do it for many years. Alcohol was okay, but marijuana, I knew there was something wrong, and I didn't want it. But I did it anyway. I was powerless. After a few months of doing it almost every single day, I tried to quit. What happened was, because I was doing it alone without telling anybody, I ended up without my crutch, without the thing that helped me be okay. I know some people, they're able to drink and they use substances, whatever it is, to go out of themselves, to go a little crazy. But for me, I needed it just to be normal. I needed it to function. When I quit, I isolated myself, and I ended up basically by myself. I was just by myself. I was living in a dorm. We're in yeshiva, and all the people that were close to me in yeshiva just kind of saw me all by myself. At night, I would sit there learning chitas, and I even had a video of the Rebbe playing in front of me in case I would get distracted. I would look at the video of the Rebbe. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that I was trying to find something else to replace what I had, and it wasn't working. It isolated me. When I was about 20, was the first time I started having consequences. I spent the night in prison. And when I was in prison, it was Yud Aleph Nisan. I was lying on a cement bed in Eilat. I took the shoes off my feet, I put it into my shirt, and I used it as a pillow, and I lied down. And that night, I made a vow. I would never smoke marijuana again. I promise you, Rebbe. I was freed the next day, and I got high the next day. At that point, I started losing my self-respect. What happened to my vow? What happened? I really, really meant it. The second time I tried to stop was over a Pesach. I'd come in from Israel, and I had a relative that allowed me to stay in their house, which was away from the community, and I didn't have any access. I got to make a point that this is all me trying to quit smoking marijuana, not realizing that alcohol was still a problem. I isolated myself in a house for a week, and I didn't get high, but I got drunk. I got drunk all day, every single day, and I thought I was detoxing. 2 weeks later, I was high again. These are empty promises. The way I was looking at myself was just terrible. I had zero self-respect. My word meant basically nothing when I'm talking about commitments. After Israel, I came back home at about 22, 23. I got engaged, and I made another promise. And my promise was that when I get engaged, after I get engaged, 30 days before the wedding, from that day, I'm never going to smoke marijuana again. But that didn't happen. And then I took a trip to Australia. I had 24 full hours without access to it. But the night before the wedding, my chest was so closed up, I could not survive. I could not live. I could not sleep. And I ended up getting high the night before my wedding. By some sort of miracle, I stayed so clean. Never mind, I'm still drinking. For the 7 days of Sheva Brachas. And after 7 Sheva Brachas, that night I got high again. I was not planning to, and I can promise you that. This is a stage where, from here and on, I was surviving. I was still getting high. My drinking started progressing and becoming daily, and the quantities were becoming more and more. But more fundamentally for me was that my resentments, my guilt, and my shame, the shame for things I've done and the resentments for what I thought, which is not necessarily so, but I believed that I was done wrong. My relationship with God was mostly consisted of me saying, I'm trying to do the right thing. Why do you keep making it so difficult for me? I knew I needed help. But if I asked for help, then I would have to stop getting high, and I couldn't do that. At a certain point, I felt like I was leading a double life. I was hiding the fact that I was breaking Shabbos to get high. Again, against all my morals, against every fiber in my being. I wanted to keep Shabbos, but I couldn't do it. When my wife was pregnant, she was begging me to please stop. And I really wanted to stop. And I made a promise that as soon as the baby comes, I will stop. But I didn't. Second baby, and also the same thing. I was smoking and drinking before and after absolutely everything. If we took the kids, and we got them into the car, and it wasn't quick enough, and I had an extra couple of seconds, I would have to go back in and get high again. My second to last attempt to quit was over Pesach. I knew I was going to Australia. Again, I would get that 24-hour grace, which I ended up getting off the plane in California, and a friend came to the airport to get me high. But once I got to Australia, I actually stayed clean. I would wake up from sweats many times in the middle of the night, again, plagued with resentments. I thought at the time that if only my wife would do what I need her to do, then I would be happy. But I knew that she wouldn't do everything I want her to do. And therefore, that made me angry. And when I knew that my anger wouldn't do anything, that made me sad. And I felt hopeless. And at that point, the only answer was, the only way for me to live is to get a divorce. This is within 5 days. Untreated alcoholism. Untreated addiction. That's what it is. Thinking that if only you change, if only you go away, I'll be okay. But that's obviously not the truth. I stayed clean for a full week in Australia. We did a stop. I left by myself. I ended up taking a stopover in Israel. I didn't smoke. And when I got on the plane and I got off that plane, I knew I would never smoke again. Never. I got off the plane in New York and I knew I would never smoke again. I got into the taxi and I knew I'd never smoke again. I got out of the taxi and came into my house, dropped off my bags, and I knew I would never smoke again. But somehow, my feet just took me to the place where I kept my stash, and I got high. Against everything, my mind, my heart, my everything was saying, don't do it. You're not going to do it. You got this. But I was powerless. No matter how much willpower and even time I had, without help, I was powerless. At that point, I had, the best way to say this is I had a big ego and a low self-esteem. This is what was going on inside me. I felt like I deserved more, which is what fed my resentments. And I had such low self-esteem that I felt like everything I had, I did not deserve. This is untreated alcoholism, untreated addiction. I would come home from work every single day. Don't say hi to me until I get high. And once I do, now Tati's home. Towards the end was really, really bad. I was plagued with fear. I'd be up until about 4 or 5 o'clock every single night. I'd be hearing noises. This is just alcohol and marijuana. I'd be hearing noises. At one point in time, I remember hearing somebody trying to break into my car outside, and I went running to the window, looking out, and I saw some people, and I shouted at them, and they ran away. Until today, I have no idea if that even happened. The fear got so bad, and the health things, I was already waking up in the morning, throwing up and things like that. There was a lot of health things, but I could not ask for help, because if I did, they would tell me I couldn't drink and I couldn't get high. This is one of the lowest points, and that was when I felt like I was going to die. I would go to bed at night,